Hey y'all, it's Laura and I have 20 layouts that are featuring nature photos, camping photos, outdoorsy photos, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to flip through some of these. I need to do a bunch of camping layouts still, and so I thought this would give me a little bit of inspiration to look at some past layouts that were really focused on the outdoors and the camping aspect. So let's dive in, shall we? First up, we have this nice large photo, and this is a 6x12 photo. So how I did this was I have two of these collaged together in a photo editing app, and then printed them 12x12 from Persnickety Prints. And so then when I came in, I just simply cut them down the middle, and so I have a 6x12 photo. This is one of my favorite photos, not only because it features one of my kiddos on a camping trip and doing something technological, which I just thought was a really funny moment when they're out on these campouts and things, and they're so far removed from the rest of the world, and still that connection there that's so important to them. But at the same time, you see this juxtaposition of the compass and the backpack and the obvious hiking that was happening around them. And so I think that's a really fun kind of photo to blow up and really focus in on the details with. So for this layout, I just did my 6x12 photo on the left, and then on the right side, I took a 12x12 piece of paper, this one happens to be from Cocoa Vanilla, and did a tone-on-tone through the rainbow. Because this large photo, like I said, has a lot of detail, so it doesn't need an extreme amount of embellishing to accompany it. I just wanted to get the message across, right? I wanted to show there is some magic in being in the outdoors, and all of these ways that this particular child makes me feel as well. So it's a bit of both. It's a bit of, acknowledging the outdoors. We've got our little rainbow, we've got our butterflies, we've got florals. So we're bringing in a lot of the outdoors into this layout, but while still playing with the idea of you brighten my world, make your own sunshine, loving every moment, nothing but blue skies, look at the bright skies. So it's a mixture of acknowledging what the photo is about and also encouraging the child in the photo. So how did I come up with this to go with this? I pulled colors. So when you look at the photo, you're going to see here's some bright pink, here's some bright pink. You've got some of this beautiful kind of a purpley maroon color, matches this perfectly. And that was the first thing that got my attention, was the color of the sweater. And then the phone is the same color as this level of the rainbow. We've got the green and the compass. So as you can see, I'm literally just pulling colors from the photo that really pop out and matching them the best I can with the paper that I pulled. Down here, I kept the title very simple. Again, this is such a simple layout. I think this took me maybe 20 minutes to do. And so that's a really fun way to get a big important memory onto a page quickly. Tone on tone, pull colors from the photos, simple embellishing. For the next one, this one is from a camping trip that was a couple of years ago, I believe. And for this one, I just used some paper strips. So these are those leftover strips at the end of a kit. And I just used those as an anchor point for everything else. So anchor point, just stacking up those lovely layered pieces. Some of them have been roughed up with some scissors, and then I outlined them with my gel ink pen to give them a little bit more depth. I've added some chipboard embellishments here. So this was a one big wreath out of chipboard. I've cut it in half and tucked in two pieces, one on either side, giving it that nice diagonal flow that kind of offsets from the more vertical background, just gives a little bit more interest on the page by going a little different direction. And then I've come in with circles. So you notice the theme on this one is a lot of circles. And that is a great way to break up a big block. So we've got blocky lines, we've got blocky photos, and we've got a big block here in the background as well. Adding these circles will kind of soften that blocky look and give it a little bit more whimsy. And that's definitely happening with these florals as well. So don't be afraid to take florals onto a camping layout. Again, where am I pulling colors from? The photos, of course. So we've got a lot of greens in the background. So you've noticed several of these strips are green, a kind of a yellow tone to these leaves. So I've pulled in the yellow. We've got pinks and kind of a purpley color on this shirt, so we pulled those in as well. The red I used very, very lightly in the background because it was a color that didn't super complement the rest of the colors, but I decided pops of red here and there just to kind of acknowledge that photo just kind of bring it in a little bit. It does draw a lot of attention to itself, which is why I put it in the center of the two photos. So that way it's bringing you into the journaling, it's bringing you into the rest of the layout, the important bits of the layout. It's right in the center. My title is vertical, coming down the side, which is something I don't normally do, but it's a fun little change. I'm pretty sure this was a scrap lift, so it's probably in my scrap lift Sunday playlist if you're looking for this one. Next up is this one. So this is a diagonal layout, and this is using some photos from a beautiful tree that was at my university. I went to the University of Mississippi when I got my degree, and this beautiful, I think it's called a Japanese magnolia, has these absolutely stunning, stunning flowers in the spring. And so I have taken a lot of pictures of it. I'm sorry, it's a Japanese pink tulip magnolia, that's what it's called. So beautiful florals. This is outside photos, and I wanted to show you a couple different things. A diagonal layout is a great way to add a little bit more interest to three photos that are very similar. So because they all focus on the tree, I've got three different perspectives of these beautiful florals. I've got the tree itself, I've got a close-up of the florals, and then I have my little shoes here underneath of the tree where some of the florals have fallen down. And I've given you, there's three different perspectives of the tree, which really captures, I think, the moment as well as the beauty of the tree itself. And so I've used more Cocoa Vanilla here on this one. That is my favorite creator of scrapbooking supplies. So you will see a lot of that one, but bring in these lovely little pieces of frames. These are the corners of some ephemera frames. This ephemera frame, as it happens. So I've used part of it here, and then the corners that I didn't use that would have been tucked under here, I added to the outside edges just to give it a little bit more detail. One of the other things I've done is I've stair-stepped my pieces. So we've got little layers, but they're in levels. And so that guides your eye through the layout. Whether you start at the top or you start at the bottom, it doesn't matter. These levels are going to just kind of very nicely guide your eye through the layout. So that's a fun one. Here's another outdoorsy layout. So this one was actually done about a school field day. And so my little kiddos were outside playing in this massive mound of sand that the school had dumped onto a just open area, and let the kids have some fun with buckets and pails and things like that. So I sort of incorporated a beach theme to this one. So this is again using a Cocoa Vanilla collection that has the kind of tropical vibe. And so I've incorporated a lot of like these little drinks with the umbrella and the florals with the more floral kind of like tropical theme, because even though this is not a tropical area, this is not even at the beach, it works really well color-wise, and the theme of all of the sand playing in the sand, I think kind of works. So that's why I did that. So we've got the bright pink of her dress being picked up in some of these florals. We've got the color of the buckets perfectly matching some of these florals. We've got little yellows, we've got oranges, we've got this blue, and those little pops of color are all around the layout. This one's a very special layout because it started again with just a couple of strips as an anchor point, but then I did some really interesting embellishing. So I did a triangular embellishment cluster. So one at the top, one on either corner here at the bottom. So this creates a triangle of interest, 3 spots that kind of frame my photos. And then down here at the bottom, I have another small cluster next to my title, just to give it a place to be. It gives it a purpose. It makes this feel very intentional. I've not just plopped my title here and some journaling. This just makes it feel a little bit more intentional, a little bit more special. I've added little bits around the edges. So like these little pieces here came off of the titles, and they were just like little pieces inside of the H, for example, inside of the L's, right? So I've used them to add a little bit more emphasis to my floral clusters, which is a really fun idea. I've also taken some beautiful clear stickers and used them as the bottom layer underneath some other embellishing. So if you have clear stickers and you find them really difficult to use, try them on a white background and try to layer them underneath of your cardstock ephemera pieces and see if you don't like that layered look better without adding a ton of bulk to the layout. Next up, we have this layout, which is pictures of some beautiful florals, but also butterflies. So there's a beautiful monarch butterfly in these photos, and you don't see it right off because it is the same color as the florals. And one of the ways I've kind of tried to guide your eye to those butterflies is to put this little balance right here, and this little cluster is very close to kind of where I want your eye to go. So if you have photos that are really busy like this and you really want to hone in on one area, you can use a little arrow if you want to point at the important part of the photo, but you can also do things like this that kind of gently guide the eye into the point of that photo. And in this one, we have two versions. This is kind of the top view and the side view of the butterfly. And then in the background, I've literally just mimicked the background of the photos and kind of made it feel like you are in the photo. So these beautiful florals here have the same color tones as are in the photo. So we've got bits of yellow here. We've got, of course, the pinkish reds. We've got a little bit of pink, a little bit of red. We've got the beautiful greens in the background as well. And then some of these leaves even have this kind of blue tone, which I think works really, really well. Very simple layout. Put down my photos. Put a scattering of florals just around the edges. So it's just anchored, kind of sitting in a pool of flowers, if you will. Added this lovely cut apart piece as my title, a couple little word phrases, and journaling. Done. Super easy. When you're using a pattern paper background like this, you really don't have to do a ton of background work. It's kind of done for you. And so that's what I did with this one, just kind of expanding out from the photos onto the background. This layout is a camping layout, and my family did a lot of camping when the kids were younger. They had a blast, loved the outdoors, and so I have a lot of layouts and photos like this. But this is a really fun one where they had gone to a camp out and they had this like area that you could pan for gold and things like that. And really you were just finding pretty rocks. But for this layout, what I wanted to do is incorporate a lot of the colors that are in this photo in an interesting way. As you can see, these photos are fairly simple. They don't have a lot going on. And I wanted to kind of dress up the layout and give it a little bit more personality than the very simple photos. And so I've pulled in a collection. I believe this one is from Pink Fresh, and it has the same color. So we've got this kind of like reddish color here, and we've got pops of the red here and there all the way through. We've got the green, the bright green of my son's shirt is a big color in the background. We've got grays. So one of my other kids is wearing gray. So we've got lots of gray in the background. And this red here is a kind of a softer tone of that same shade of red. That's why it works really well to kind of tuck this in to the background. So I've just punched out all of these shapes from a 6x6 paper pad. I've layered some wood veneer because of course you see lots of wood in the background here with this table that they're using and the trees. It was a nice way to incorporate a lot of wood grain and wood veneer pieces. I've added in some bits and pieces here from a Cocoa Vanilla collection. I believe this title is Cocoa Vanilla. This one is Pink Fresh. And taking this into a vertical title was a great way to kind of finish off this side of the page. So I have this shape that's coming in, pointing at my photos, which leads your eye straight into the photos. Always want that to be my focal point. And then this kind of just finishes it off. So that if you're coming in here, you're gonna come down here. So it's very much about guiding the eye through the layout and adding in bits and pieces that add to the story. So like these have little camping images. These say super cool, captured, one of a kind, risk taker, play all day, family time, things that relate to the photos. So this lovely little arrow at the bottom just felt like the perfect way to make your eye stop. It was just otherwise an empty space, and I really wanted to give it kind of an anchor point of this is where it ends. It's also part of a 2-page layout, so this helps to kind of point to the other side of the layout. Here is the next layout, and this one was again at a camping trip. So this was at Old Kayakima. This is a scouting camp, and we've used frames in the background. I do have some dies that will allow me to cut out frames from anything. And so I've used pattern paper here and just cut out the color that I needed for this layout. Again, I'm pulling the colors from the layout in the pictures. So we've got a lot of this kind of a yellow tone here. So we've got pops of yellow in this one. We've got on their little uniforms, we've got this kind of a blue. So I've added in similar blue here. Lots of green, of course, because we have lots of green in the background. I've picked up this sort of grayish khaki color that is very similar to their shorts. So you see that in a couple places as well. This one was using an Amy Tangerine collection. And I think one of my favorite details on this is these little enamel dots that are in groupings. So I've got this one in threes is filling in this space. I've also got some cork here at the bottom. So we're picking up some of the darker browns with the cork, some wood grain on the wood veneer from, again, the background, the trees and the ground. You're getting a lot of that color. And I think that's a great way to frame these photos within frames. So you're using the frames to create a background, and then you're adding your photos right on top. So make sure that they get the focal image. They're the focus of the layout still, even with all of this going on. And then I went with a super simple white cardstock and washi border. So again, having a super simple background allows me to get a little bit busier in the middle and keep all of the focus and attention on the photos. Here's the next layout. This one has a column design. So we have a column of smaller photos and then a kind of smaller layout next to it. So this allows me to feature one photo in particular that I think really tells a lot of the story. And then I can include a lot of other smaller photos that in this case were not as good quality and were just kind of interesting touristy sort of pictures that my husband at the time had taken. And so we have things that they were doing on the journey, but that were not really important to me. But I wanted to include them. I wanted you to be able to see them. So I did a little strip of photos here, and just for a bit of fun, I did them in color and in black and white, and then just stacked them together. I do think that black and white photos sometimes show you a lot more of the detail that you miss in brightly colored photos. So this way you can kind of see a little bit more detail in these photos, but you can also see what they look like in real life. I've created a column on this side with some washi tape as borders and some cardstock on top. This side, again, we've got that stack of paper strips. This is a great way to use up scraps, a great way to use up paper strips or those little manufacturing strips at the bottom, is to kind of use them as your anchor point underneath of everything else. What I really love about this particular layout is not only does this beautiful sticker just kind of perfectly curve around my title, but it just seems to tuck in like just the whole thing, this whole section, the title itself just seems to tuck in quite perfectly underneath of this photo layer. And I think that's a really fun way to do a title, to have this kind of embellishment underneath, to bring a little bit more cohesiveness, like a rounded off, finished look to this title. Here is the next layout, and this one is using a bunch of triangles. Now this was a little bit of an experiment because I don't normally use a lot of triangles on my layouts. And so by building this little section here, this is my anchor point. So this is where the layout started, and then from there it branches out and it goes horizontally. Something a little bit different for me, something that I was experimenting with, and I really like how this one turned out, especially because the title helps to bring the photos and anchor it to the anchor point. So it kind of adds that little bridge, if you will, to the anchor point for my photos to sit on top of. And then filling in a little bit of blank space down here, I just added in some journaling that was on white cardstock layered onto some scraps of navy, which is the same as this background here. So this is a fairly simple layout. It was a lot of fun to do, to fill in the backs of these cut files with some patterned paper that grabs some of the colors from this layout. So these are in a cave, which is very dark. So a lot of these photos are very dark, but we did pull in some of this beautiful green and kind of a turquoisey blue into the background. We've got some of the yellow and orangey tones in some of the embellishments and in the background itself, and a little bit of that black from their t-shirts as well, popping on the page. So this was a really fun one. You want to dress up these background elements with little things like word phrase stickers or some just cut aparts. In this case, these little fussy cut shapes that were in the Pink Fresh Studio. I think it was Pink Fresh Studio collection I was using, but this background is something else. And I just kind of mashed them together, but we got some of that orange on this paper. We've got some of the red from the chandelier in this paper, just bringing those colors straight out of the photos and translating them onto the page. Here is our next layout. This one is just a backyard layout. So this was up at our old house. We had this beautiful little play set here and up in the trees. I just love this view from the ground of her playing on the top of the play set and the trees in the background. Just really cool view of her. And so again, I'm using that tropical collection from Cocoa Vanilla, bringing in a lot of bits and pieces here that are a little bit more experimental. And I like to do that with my layouts to try things that are new and see what I can make work. In this case, because these are summer layouts, it was taken in June, I was able to incorporate things like sunglasses and flip-flops, even though she's not wearing shoes. They fit that kind of sunny summer feel. And so that's why I'm including those things. I even stuck some little fruits on here just to get them used up and because the colors went well. We're bringing in some of the pink from her shorts. This beautiful blue was what absolutely led me to this collection because it is the exact same blue and I love this shade of blue. And so we brought in some kind of yellow elements from the softer yellower tones in the background. We've got, of course, the greens in there as well. And then you can still add some things. So if we don't necessarily have any red in this particular, there's no red in this photo at all, but the collection had a bit of red kind of added in. And so we just kind of augmented that red. We just kind of added to that red, made it make sense. So we got a little bit of red here inside of these florals. And so in order to make sure that red kind of ties into the rest of the layout, I've added little bits of red in other places to make sure that it feels cohesive. Again, this one is a super simple background, one long vertical strip, some small strips for borders, another strip across in the horizontal, and that was it. That was the background. Added some lovely titles here. This was a cut apart, one long cut apart that I cut in half and turned it into our title, backed it with some paper scraps underneath. So much fun, so much fun. Layered labels. Again, we're doing this lovely little adding a cluster to a bottom bit of embellishing. So instead of just plopping my journaling down, I've added a cluster to make it feel important to the layout, a little bit more cohesive. On a 9x12, I think it's really important to make sure that all of the elements work together because they are a little scrunched together. You can't get away with quite as much separation on a smaller layout. On this layout, we are again using Cocoa Vanilla, it looks like. Yes, we are. And I absolutely love this one. This one is something that I used to call pocketless pages, where it's essentially just a collage of photos and embellishments inside of the layout. They don't necessarily have a background created for them. So there's no frames in the background, there's no shapes, there's no strip of paper, there's no anchor point on this layout. And the way that I made this feel more cohesive is to draw in a border around the outside that helps to create that anchored look without using an actual piece of paper to anchor it. But all of these just kind of puzzled together in the different places, and overlapping the lines, coming over the side a little bit, I think is just fun. Breaks up that blocky feel a little bit to have these little florals on here. Bringing in a couple of different ideas. I've got some stitching, again, to add some softness and whimsy to an otherwise very grid layout heavy feel. So it kind of just softens that a little bit more. My photos felt a little stark, so I added these little word phrases here that kind of break them up a little bit, soften the overall look, make them fit in with the rest of the layout. So this one, absolutely love this one. The next layout is from in the backyard again. This time we're playing with bubbles. And so again, we're pulling from the background, from the photos for this layout. So we've got beautiful circles all throughout without the bubbles, also little circles within the bubble gun. And so I decided circles was the way to go. So I die cut out some circles with the gold glitter paper in my stash. I have this beautiful mixed media style paper. I did some of those. We did some stitching around the circles as well, just to add something that wasn't paper, something that was a little bit different. And again, I think that stitching adds a great detail, and it also adds a little bit of like a softness and whimsy to the layout that I think is really fun. God, our title is just one of those lovely ephemera titles plopped on in between two of our photos. This is where I want the main attention to be drawn. So you'll notice I quite often put the title very close to my main photos or the photos that I want to draw the most attention to. That is fully intentional. Our brains love words. They love when they see words, especially big words. We do tend to kind of zone in on that first. And this way you're catching the most important details of the layout when you zone in on those words. Adding in some summer themed elements like the sun, some florals, and of course just little hearts and circles that tie in with the larger shapes in the background. So super simple, really fun. This is another simple layout, one that I really like, and it has two photos in two little clusters, kind of their own separate clusters, but they do match. So there are elements on both that tie in with the other, things like cluster of little butterflies, cluster of little butterflies. We have a horizontal word phrase going into a corner embellishment cluster. We have a horizontal word phrase going into a corner embellishment cluster. We have little things popping out of the top, little things popping up out of the top. We have a frame coming out of the side of this photo. We have our journaling spot coming out of this photo. So we're kind of mirroring the two and just setting them on the same layout, and that helps them to feel more cohesive, even though they're very separate. Each of these photos has their own kind of element to this story. So this is my late husband and this is my daughter. And so they had such a really, really close relationship. I wanted to capture that relationship. And so I chose two photos that really, I think, captured their relationship where pretty much daddy just loves to spoil her. She got tired of walking, he picked her up. You know, so that's what I'm trying to capture. It's not only matching the background, but also the feel of the moment. And so we've got bits of red matching our red shirt. Now they're not perfect matches in this one because I couldn't find anything in my collection that was quite this shade of red and worked with the other colors as well. Because her uniform is gray, I didn't want to bring in a lot of gray elements, but I wanted to complement that gray to make sure she stood out in those photos. Next up, we have this lovely layout. This is another backyard layout. This is at someone else's house. And of course, we've brought in this beautiful ombre background to match her dress, but we've made the photo stand out by picking an opposite color, this beautiful yellow, which also appears several places in these lovely photos. So we can tie it in with the photos, but still make it stand out from the background by going with a warm tone over the cool tone. This one is very simple vertical background. Again, with the borders, I do like a good border, and I've dressed up this border with some tiny little fussy cut hearts, and that's such a fun detail that adds just a little bit more interest on the page. But overall, this is really simple. Again, with that stair stepping, so that it guides your eye through the layout. Tucked in my title at the bottom. It's not the most important part of this layout, and so I've kept it very simple and subtle at the bottom. This layout was very much about using the background that I had to work with. So this gorgeous piece of paper is from an old Paige Evans collection, and it already had these beautiful printed florals in two corners. And so I went with the design, didn't fight it, went with the design and continued that diagonal across the page by putting in some die cut hexagons stacked on top of each other, puzzled together in a couple of places, and just kind of filled in the gaps between them. Now I didn't overlap onto this, so you'll notice that there is a little bit of a gap here and a gap here, and that is intentional because again, I want the attention to be on the photos, and I didn't want it to blend completely into the background and lose the photos. This is the other reason that I went with a black and white photo in the center, is to make sure that that grabbed your attention, because there's not much black anywhere else on the page, and so that one color being in one spot draws all of your attention in immediately to the focal image. Same with my title. I've brought in all of those black elements, those dark elements closer to the photos so that that is where your attention goes. But I've also brought in these little butterflies that have a little bit of black, and that helps to kind of make it feel like it fits on the page, that it doesn't stand out so much that it feels like it is glaringly obvious and it doesn't fit, it doesn't work. This works quite well because I've blended it in into the background very subtly. Love this one. Now we've got an L design. So this is a L background. And so we've created an anchor point with a couple of strips of paper. We've done some fussy cutting borders here on the side. We've got another strip of paper here, and then 2 strips up here at the top. So I had a lot of photos for this layout, and I wanted to get them all onto one page. I think I had probably 20 some odd photos from this strip to include. And so my way of getting a lot of photos onto a layout is to print them a little bit smaller. Now, can you still see what you're meant to see? Absolutely. They had so many different waterfalls. I picked the 2 photos that I thought really captured the kids' experience at the waterfall. So I have 2 of my kiddos featured here. The really large falls, I have zoomed in on the picture and then printed it smaller. So you're still seeing a nice close-up and some detail of these falls. So this is the close-up, and this is the kind of backed away picture. Close-up and the backed away picture. So you can still see those details of the sights that they saw while they were there, but also you get to kind of get the moment of all of these waterfalls they got to see. It just has such a beautiful motion to it, and even in the photos. And I wanted to capture that, but also kind of break it up a little bit, because it can be a little overwhelming to have all of these photos kind of crowded together in one spot on the layout. I've created 3 separate clusters for my photos. This, of course, is the highlight. That's why I put the title and made these ones bigger, is that's the one I want you to focus on first. But from there, you can kind of follow with your eye through the rest of the layout. This was a really fun one. We have another bubble layout. This one is with the other child playing with the bubble gun. And again, went with these circles. This will go into a different album, so I don't mind that it's pretty similar to the last one. And I also did change it up a little bit. So where the first one was a vertical row of bubbles, now we have a diagonal flow of bubbles. And within this diagonal flow of bubbles, I've just kind of made some smaller clusters around the outside, and then one larger cluster in the middle. So just a little different take on the same general ideas. Again, using die cuts to make these frames was a great way to use up some scrap paper. I love the fact that this floral cluster just kind of follows the line of that circle. I just think that's a really fun element to include. This is one from the autumn. So we have some autumn leaves changing colors. We've got some florals that here in the South do bloom in the fall or autumn, depending on where you are and how you refer to the season. And this background was really fun. I have some chipboard circles that I made just using a bowl, tracing a bowl from my kitchen. And I use those quite often in my scrapbooking. In this case, I used them to make some big background circles out of patterned paper and just kind of stacked them up haphazardly. So they're not in a perfect order. They're not only in the corners. If I'd put this one here in the corner, move this one down, it could have been the 4 corners and separated it this way. But I wanted it to have more of a whimsical feel. I wanted it to feel kind of incidentally just sort of plopped on the page. I also wanted to tie in this circle with this one because all of this was kind of overlapping the top. I felt like it needed a little bit more anchoring underneath to help it feel like it made sense. Again, I have 2 clusters of photos. They have several things that are mirroring of each other so that they stay important on the layout. We've got the title going across both sets of photos. We have journaling underneath this one. We have a word phrase underneath this one. So it's kind of mimicking each other in the placement. We've got a cluster on the left side here, a cluster on the right side here. So as you can see, I'm just mirroring the 2. Same thing here. I had added this lovely cluster because this felt very empty. And I thought, oh, let's add a little cluster here. Once I did that, I thought, oh, this one looks empty. And so I added a little cluster here. So there's a lot going on this page, which is why it's in a white background. It allows me to get a little bit more experimental, have a little bit more fun with the tiny details if I keep the very background so simple. Now this one I believe was a scrap lift, and I love the concept of this. So these photos are from a park we had gone to play at, and the photos themselves are not great. Partially because my kids aren't paying any attention to the camera, they're not really looking at what's going on, and so really just wanted to document the moment and their excitement of being at this park. And so I wanted to capture that feeling more than anything else. And so I've got some splatters in the background in kind of a rainbow pattern here. Not quite a rainbow pattern, but you know what I'm saying. I've got a little bit of green, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red, and then we come in with a long strip of florals. So this is literally just a line of florals across the bottom that I have purposefully shaped to hug the sides of my title and my photos. So these are just purposefully shaped to create interest and not just have like a bunch that are just like scrunched together. They're spaced out. We've got layers, pieces that are behind other pieces. We have some that are just kind of flaring out just for a bit of interest on the outsides, kind of like a bouquet would be. And I think this sort of explosion of florals really gives you a lot of that energy, that feeling of energy that these photos should have kind of initiated within you. Like you should feel like this is a very energetic scene. And these photos don't really have that feel because they were just sitting there and swinging. But we were running around most of the time, but that's hard to get photos of. So these are the photos I have. I work with what I have and try to capture the feeling as well as try to match the colors the best I can. Again, this beautiful red, I love this kind of cherry red. And it's in a lot of my photos. It's a very common color for children's play sets, children's clothes, and it's very hard to find a collection that has a true cherry red like this. And so often I have to just kind of find something that's close or has kind of the same vibe, or I just pick up the other colors. I've got this beautiful blue from her dress that I've matched to this. Their skin tones matched this color of floral quite well. And then we have, of course, the green in the background. And so I just kind of picked out colors that worked with the photos. And this we just kind of had to make do with. It's not perfect, but we're not looking for perfection. Again, with our dark title, very close to the photos. We have pops of black throughout the layout, so that works out quite well. And lots of layering. This is the last one, and it is using our shelf design. So I have two shelves here. And this one is just one big long strip with a little strip on top. Same thing here, big long strip, little strip on top. I've done my title down at the bottom with a large cluster, put my photos up at the top with some journaling, and just kind of separated the elements this way. Now I did want to connect them. I didn't want them to feel like they were just floating in space with no purpose. And so I created this little kind of falling leaves and falling flowers that sort of connects the top to the bottom. And again, these photos are going to draw your eye and your attention first because they do have some colors that don't exist on the page elsewhere. You know, this bold black of the paint of the brick in the background doesn't exist anywhere on the layout. So you're going to draw your attention first to the photos, and then it's going to kind of guide your eye down into the rest of the layout. That's it for me, guys. I do hope this was inspirational in some way, give you a little idea of something new to try with your outdoorsy camping layouts. You'll notice that I'm not afraid to bring in florals, even if it's a fairly masculine layout. I think outdoors is outdoors. Florals are fine. And so I don't be afraid to experiment a little bit with that and kind of try things a little outside of the theme of the products you're using. Like when we used our sand field day photos on beach embellishments and paper. And when we're using our little squirrels here on a kind of Thanksgiving, autumn, fall themed collection. So definitely experiment, have a little bit of fun, and I hope this was helpful. Until next time, bye y'all.